This is the Data Slice, hosted by the Data Science Alliance. It's where we sit down to talk all things data science, AI, and tech, any way you slice it. I'm Callum Hobman, and I'm extra excited about our episode today because our two special guests today are actually on the DSA team with me. We have Leslie Jo here. She's one of our data scientists, and then Fish Nightmare, our principal brand designer. So, hey, teammates, how you doing today?
Doing very good. It's very good to be on the podcast again. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, appreciate, taking your time out of our DSA day. But today we are having Fish and Leslie put on their separate artist hat. Even though Leslie's a data scientist with DSA, she has lots of experience and background with art and working with artists. Fish has an extensive background in design and art and everything. So just a disclaimer, today they aren't representing DSA on the podcast. They are here just representing their own thoughts and feelings and opinions on art. And we're going to dive into AI and art and how we are just seeing those two things intersect more and more these days. I know we have lots to dive into when it comes to the AI and art topic, but first, for just a little more background, could each of you, and we can start with you, Leslie, could you each talk just a little more about your background with art and what kind of led you to being on this podcast and talking about this topic today?
Yeah, so I am a formally trained data scientist, but I spend a lot of my time, a lot of my hobby time making art books and interacting with a lot of artists and creative people. So fanfic writers and fan artists especially, we publish these little art books that just contain art and stories, and there's a lot of worry and concern in that world that I've seen around what's happening with the generative AI art scene. And then as a data scientist who has a master's in data science from University of San Diego, undergrad with applied mathematics before data science was even a discipline, this is a technology that we have to face and figure out how we're going to be moving forward with it. The cat's already out of the bag. We can't put it back in. So what are we going to be doing moving forward?
Yeah, and I started in the design world, learning about comic books. I've been drawing as long as I could hold a pencil, and so I graduated from art school. So I've spent a lot of time in the art space, creating art in every sort of fashion, from paper and pencil and cut paper and glue and to digital art, and now to looking at how AI can be a tool for artists in the AI space, as rather than being something that is stealing from them. So and we'll get into all of that in a little bit as well. So yeah. So I'm very much an advocate of artists, but I'm also an advocate of technology and how we can utilize technology in the best way possible, in the most ethical way possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, like you said, Leslie, cat's out of the bag. Just kind of meaning, yeah, that the tech is here, it's being used. So let's talk about how we use it moving forward. So for people who maybe aren't as up to date on AI when it comes to art, could you guys talk a little more about, what is generative AI? That's definitely, the extra hot topic within art. So what exactly is it, and how is it being used and being connected to art these days?
Yeah, so the way that generative AI works is very similar to the way LLMs, chatbots, and large language models like ChatGPT work. So to explain that one, it's not understanding the meaning of words, but it's understanding what's statistically most likely to be the next word, given the previous word and given the whole sentence before it. So it's autofill on steroids. And the LLMs aren't parsing these words by their definitions or even by their phonetics like the way our human brains do. They are parsing it just by turning it into matrix multiplication, essentially. There's a natural language processing researcher named Fred Jelnick, I believe, heard from Fractal Philosophy on YouTube, that he said, every time I fire a linguist, our NLP gets better, our models get better, something along those lines. And if that doesn't speak to the way that these AIs are processing what information we process differently. I think this speaks very strongly to how it's interpreting this differently. Um, and the way that AI art then works is they are doing that but with pixels, essentially. So it can learn that this little gray blob is associated with a button, except it doesn't call it a button, but it understands that when you make a prompt with Victorian era in there, it understands that these little gray blobs are going to pop up a bunch, and given the other buttons that it's learned from, the button should look kind of like this. Meanwhile, a human artist like myself or Fish or anyone else who's designing a character could decide to put a character's family crest on the button. And that's a very human decision that generative AI does not really touch upon.
I think that that's all spot on, right? I think at least my personal opinion, and I think there are probably some other artists that share this opinion as well, is an important distinction to make is that generative AI is not art. It is a generated image, right? And as Leslie so eloquently put it, it is generated using mathematics and algorithms, and well, actually, not even really mathematics. It's it's just associations and assumptions, right? So and you can and so there are a variety of different flaws that can generate when it from any given image that it tries to generate and that sort of thing. So and so it's being used today by a lot of people as a means of sort of getting around commissioning an artist, right? Think of prompt engineering, which is the sort of language that you use to speak to the AI as sort of request, commissioning an artist, but you're not paying the artist now. So so it's caused quite a few issues in the art space, where artists feel like they're losing agency, that their jobs are being replaced, and then and depending on what circles you travel in, if you spend any level of time on the X space, you'll see all kinds of rhetoric around it that ranges everything from AI is evil and down with all AI to people yelling at artists, telling them to get ready for the future and they're all going to be replaced. And and both reactions are sort of bombastic and don't really invite conversation or speak to the real heart of the technology itself. What can it do? How could it be used to help an artist? And, even though they only touch on like really small parts of the actual argument, right? And the actual ethics behind it, and what problems we really need to solve in order to make it something that is useful and a tool, and to treat it the way for what it really is, rather than trying to think of it as the wave of the future that's going to replace the need for people, which is which is a fallacy. I think of a high
Agreed.
on a lot of
Mhm.
levels. So, and I think the science bears that to be true as well. So,
Mhm.
my understanding of it anyway.
Yes.
That reminds me of a really popular trend on the internet as of, this past month, maybe a couple of weeks, is on the internet, not just X, but, all over all social media platforms. Probably most people have seen it, but people have been using AI to generate their images to look in the style, I guess, same as Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
I wonder if you guys, because that is a current trend, people probably have seen it, maybe not even realizing what it really is. So I'm curious, just in line with everything both of you were just saying, it sounds like that's maybe a really good current example of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Do
I
you
mean,
you
it
want you
starts.
want to go first, Leslie?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
try to be brief with it,
Sure.
but
Sure.
it starts with the fact that uh, AI is not creative in the same way that really popular artists, such as Hayao Miyazaki of Studio Ghibli, are. AI has to learn from other things, and it doesn't to bring it back to the math thing, it doesn't learn in the same way that humans do. So in order for it to create images in the Ghibli style, it had to learn and train on tons and tons of Miyazaki and of Studio Ghibli property. And Hayao Miyazaki absolutely hates AI. Granted, he hasn't gone on record saying exactly that, but in multiple occasions in the past, or at least one very strongly recorded situation, or one situation where it was recorded him being very strongly opinionated against this direction. And for these AIs to essentially really truly steal his work is, I think, wildly unethical.
I don't know his current opinions. I don't know the man. I've never met him, but I I've watched Spirited Away more times than I can count. And I do think that there's something very critical to when it comes to the ethics of AI, like how the models, and we're not even, and this is not even to dig into the environmental impact of things, which we'll touch on, I think, at some point. But just how you're getting people's information, right? I know that there are a lot of there's a lot of litigation going on. There's a lot of stuff in the legal space that's happening when it comes to AI and generative AI in particular, and how it relates to copyright infringement and intellectual property and fair use and all of those things. But in this specific case, like, this is a massive studio that has a humongous body of work, and if they didn't get this studio's permission to use their work, I can't. I find it shocking that there isn't a legal action against them, against any AI companies who are promoting this sort of thing. Um, yeah, at the same time, I think there, pe- pe- the sad fact of it is that people are going to use AI for fun. I think, my personal opinion is we shouldn't be utilizing AI for fun because the environment. We'll get there. But I think, and I think that this brings people some surface level of joy. And so, in a world where their permission had been given for this to be a thing, I think it'd be fine. I think the first thing I thought about when I saw this was, what wouldn't it be great if Studio Ghibli did embrace AI and had their own in-house tool that was trained on their work to help streamline their workflow. That's a way in which I see, I see the AI being used for good, right? And being used to help reduce the amount of effort. Like, you don't necessarily need less people. You still need the same amount of people. But I think there's a scene that of a massive crowd moving through the space that I think it took them a year to animate something that lasted for 4 seconds. And I always think, and I think to myself, like, if it the exact same number of people, could you have done that in 6 months? Right?
Mm.
That's what I think we should be thinking about when we think about the use of AI as a tool, and can it be used in that way, right? When all, and that's ethical because all the permissions have been given, and 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 we're minimizing the impact because it's being used for a specific purpose, and then it's not being overused, right? That's sort of those are the kinds of things I would like people to be thinking about when we talk about how we use AI as a tool.
When it comes to the use of AI, the two big complaints that come up, which I think are very valid and founded, are one, the environmental impact, and
Mhm.
two, the rightfulness of it.
Yeah.
Who are these people who are prompting to be using Miyazaki style and Ghibli style when this is something that they might and probably do not want. And then this comes up with a lot of smaller artists too. They do
Yes.
not want people using their style uh, when that just feels very wrong. And there is some of arguments that happen where just tough luck, like this is how the future has to go. But does it have to? Is that really the direction that we want to let it go in? There are a lot of Python libraries, packages online that exist that are created by coders and software developers who then want to share their work with the world. It's not just Python packages, there's a whole bunch of tech related things.
Mm.
But in these, you don't always see the developers' names and the authors' names like you would on a book, or you would with a watermark in the corner of an art piece. But I think a lot of people still take pride, whether or not their name is front and center on this, take pride in their work and are excited for other people to enjoy it. When that's Python packages, it's probably being used, the packages being used and hopefully credited as well. And then when it's art, it's viewed and enjoyed, but yanked back out of the artist's hands, or not even back out, just yanked out of the artist's hands, and someone goes skipping. It's going to be some AI basically skipping away, going, "It's mine now." That's
But you know, and this is me playing the devil's advocate for a hot second, I suppose. There has been theft as long as there has been people, as long as there have been people. Someone will always find a way to use any tool for a nefarious purpose, right? And so I am of the mindset that we should not blame the tool, that we should blame the person. And we could probably get into that on a lot of different topics. But um so while I understand and agree with many artists in their argument against about why AI is bad from an ethical perspective, and why they should be protecting their artwork. And yes, you should be protecting your artwork. As an artist, you have every right to protect your artwork. As far as I am personally concerned, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like if it were me and I were in that position, I would do everything in my power to protect my artwork and protect my brand. And I think that any person who is in a profession and is working and is putting their hard earned effort into a thing should be protecting their work, and the solidarity of that work. And if people want permission to utilize their work, then they should enter a licensing agreement with you. So, but that said, but the other reality of it is that someone's going to be out there doing that, regardless of what technology it is. It was here before. People were doing that before AI existed. So it's not a new argument. Is the space that I think I fall into, but at the same time, it's still relevant.
Both of you have said things that make me think about the user side, the people that are generating these images and posting them. I wonder what your thoughts are, and maybe advice you have for people as this technology, just becomes more and more part of the norm. Because I think some people use it, and like Fish said earlier, for some people it's just fun. They don't even
Mhm.
realize, they don't think about it this way. They don't think that it's stealing. It's just a fun celebration of this style of work that they can have their own version of.
Yeah.
I read an article about this topic, and within it, they were quoting someone who just had a photo of their cat shown in this style of art, and they just thought it was fun. So, what are your thoughts on that side of things? And do you have advice for people,
Yeah.
navigating social media and the internet and consuming artwork when, it might not be on purpose? Obviously, there are cases of stealing artwork, but some of it might not be trying to steal. It's just trying to enjoy the art. So where do you think we go and from the user side of things?
Yeah. I so I think it's fair. I think it's people should understand that you wake up every morning and you consume AI. you do. If you have a Pinterest account, you consume AI. If you like pictures of houses in the on hill baked into sides of hills, it's probably AI. You know, so while you like it might feel really tempting to get involved with the latest trend, um and to use these tools and for whatever your fun whim is at that moment. But I think, as I will often say, there are people at the other end of these things. Think of like, and so what, so you should be aware that like what effect it has on people when when you're utilizing AI to and you're utilizing someone else's style. Like, you know, you should just be aware that even though you're not trying to, you are enabling that person's art to be used without their permission. So, and so that's not to, like, look at somebody and be like, oh, you're evil. We're not saying that, but like, now. So when then you need to make a choice. That's sort of the that's my personal advice. And so, and my choice personally is to engage with that as little as possible. I don't generate, I will not, you probably won't catch me generating anything in that style. you know
Yeah.
but if you pin it on your Pinterest board, like, I mean, what are you gonna do?
It's at this point in time really hard to see how things are affecting artists and the environment. We're so, at least speaking as a US American, it's really hard to see those effects. I can still turn the water on my sink and I still get some pretty drinkable water. And it's hard to see when you're just typing in a little sentence, make my cat in Studio Ghibli style or anything like that. You can't directly see how the people at Studio Ghibli are being affected because it's not just them, it's also the audience. There's also other people who
Mhm.
are going to see what you've done and think, "Ooh, cool trend. I want to do that too." So it is a bit of an exercise, I think, what I'm asking users to do. It's going to be an exercise in caring and placing empathy where maybe you can't directly see it. And considering the way that the World Wide Web works and is always asking for your attention, I know that that's a
Mhm.
steep ask, but consider the people you can't see that are still being affected by this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. It's just to remember that just to be aware that it can have an effect on somebody, and to try and be sensitive to that, and empathetic to that,
Yeah.
and to not be mean spirited in your use of things. Don't being malicious in your use of something is, well,
Because there are
one
people like that
yeah.
who exactly go into artists' comments and go, "I have now stolen your work." Oh, that's right. There was a Twitter artist, Haruno Intro, and they were live streaming the art process back in 2022 and didn't finish it in one sitting, so ended the stream for the night, went to bed. And while this person was asleep, somebody screenshot the image and gave it to an AI and asked it to finish the image. And
Mhm,
it looks bad, it feels bad, it tastes bad. It was a rotten use of
mhm,
this. And a similar thing was, um, just to continue my list of examples, Unfinished Painting by Keith Haring, which was a piece that very deliberately only has maybe a third of it complete. And you can tell the other two-thirds of this canvas are empty. And it was made to be a commentary on the AIDS epidemic and how it takes people before their time. And indeed, Keith Haring also was a victim of the AIDS epidemic. And of course, somebody decided to use generative AI to finish the picture, which just feels awful. So there really are some really bad actors, and there are definitely people, like you said, Callan, that just don't really know any better. But
Mhm.
to maybe to maybe sound like a stereotypical millennial, we have to talk, if not with our dollars, then our uses. Because
Mhm.
your use of AI to the developers is indistinguishable from bad actors' use of AI, other than maybe they're probably doing way too many prompts a day. But as a regular person, showing that this is not a product you want to support will go a long way.
To touch on like one or 2 points, like in the same realm of that, like branching away around that, I guess. Um, One, please don't be one of those people that finishes uses AI to finish someone or correct someone else's work.
Yeah.
That is like, in a world of things that are highly offensive, that is highly offensive. You may not understand the work, you may not get what, like, their specific style, you may not understand their nuance, you may not understand the type of like the time and effort it took to put into that. You may not like the work. You can have all of those opinions. You don't need to. It is highly inappropriate for someone to present their own rendition of someone else's work as if they were trying to fix it.
Mhm. And
That
there are artists
Yeah.
who will, like, build on what they've seen. Heck, that's, a lot of
Sure.
what media has,
Yeah.
but absolutely agreed that there's a difference between referencing or even building on versus kinda scamming someone.
The presentation matters. The words that you use matter. The way you present something matters, right? Say, I think there's a humongous difference in how something is received if you say, "This is my version of your artwork. I really loved your art, and I did my own version of it." Right? I in the keeping it on topic of a generative AI, though, I think that you will probably get more negative feedback than not if you were to take someone's art and then generate it in AI and say, "I did a version of your artwork in AI." I think many people would be offended by that. Um,
Like,
yeah, and so, that said, there are people who have to utilize AI every day as a part of their job. It's a part of your workflow. It's something that you have to learn how to do and that you've been mandated to do because technology companies and, well, companies in general, everyone is on the AI train. Everyone is looking for different ways that they can utilize AI, and that is in every part of their business. So that means their designers are utilizing AI, their writers are utilizing AI, their technicians are utilizing AI. So there are things that you can do to be a responsible AI ethicist, right? And that starts with the way you prompt engineer, right? Like, don't prompt engineer with the names of specific artists, right? Like, it's one thing to ask mid journey or stable diffusion or what have you to generate something in art deco, right? Or in, or in the style of an ancient master like Leonardo da Vinci. As long as you're not going to go turn around and try to sell a da Vinci painting, that would be weird.
when it
It's
comes to
another
artists who haven't given their permission, don't use their names.
Correct. You don't specifically know who has or has not opted into and given permission for their name or their work or their likenesses or what have you to be utilized in an algorithm. I think a best practice personally would be to not utilize the name of a specific artist when you prompt engineer. You can get excellent results on a program like Ideogram without ever having to name a specific artist.
Could you talk a little more about style, because I am curious about how your point of Da Vinci would be okay. What would you say is the difference? I'm thinking from the user experience, for people who want to understand better. What technically is the difference between saying generate an image of my cat in the style of Da Vinci versus saying the style of Studio Ghibli?
Right. Studio Ghibli is alive. It's a thriving company. It exists now. Like none of their work is in the public domain, right? As far as I understand it anyway, right? So whereas I would imagine that literally all of Leonardo da Vinci's work is in the public domain, right? At this point, right?
Mhm.
And so and I think that there's a note there for people who are building AI, or training AIs, right? Like training it on, it's one thing to train it on data sets that are open source, and but if there's even, or where we get, there's a lot of legal talk, we mentioned it earlier, going on about um about copyright infringement and fair use and things like that, and I think you when it's in that murky area, probably just stay away, right? Like you know like that's a way of handling that. I think that there's ongoing litigation because people aren't going to stay away, and that's how, and that's how we solve these problems in day to day, is through court battles.
I mean, the way that, to bring it back to the way AI learns, it does not create things out of nothing. It has to learn from
Right.
previous examples. So when you're asking it to do something in a specific artist's style, it is then going to use, if it has it, which unfortunately a lot of them do, the art from that exact artist and derive from those pieces so similarly that it's truthfully almost akin to like scrapbooking these
Mhm.
artists' pieces, and in a way continues as a version of theft. And that's not something that I think most alive artists are interested in being thieved from. So I agree with Fish that staying clear of it is a good idea versus the movements, art movements, entire styles, just anime style, Cartoon Network style, these types
Yeah.
of things. That's still pulling probably from a significant amount of stolen material. So in that case, do your best to use ethically sourced AIs. But
Yeah.
when it's from these larger data sets, it is going to diversify the gene pool almost a bit.
Mhm.
And it won't be scrapbooking from just Hayao Miyazaki or any singular artist. It's gonna be scrapbooking from a lot of artists, but at least at that point, there's some amount of intrinsic melding of, to use this
Yes.
Cartoon Network style, um, what is that? Alex Hirsch Gravity Falls with that Chowder cartoon, and there's some in between there that the generative
Yes.
AI might be able to illuminate that other people haven't. Although I would encourage you to still check out online art spaces. There's probably somebody who's done such a crossover or such a melding of styles.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've we've talked a lot about the user experience, so kind of switching to the artist side of things. What
Mhm.
are some steps an artist can take to maybe kind of protect their artwork? Are there softwares or tools or maybe organizations out there that are trying to help artists protect their work?
So there is this phenomenon called data poisoning, and it is a type of attack, if you will, that corrupts the data set. So in a way that artists utilize this today, um, is putting a glaze, using glaze to put a sort of layer of noise over your artwork. And there's also a tool called Nightshade that literally, like, if someone were to try to utilize your work within an AI model, to train the AI, or if someone tries to generate images based on your artwork, it will poison the result of that image and confuse the algorithm so that the algorithm uh, comes out even more flawed and ugly
Yes.
than it might otherwise.
Mhm.
There are other methods for protecting your artwork as well, that don't necessarily involve utilizing Nightshade or Glaze that have a similar effect. There are ways of well, as an artist, while you're utilizing whatever your favorite tool is, whether it's Photoshop or Procreate or Clip Studio Paint, um, and there are noise filters that you can overlay with in your artwork and then set them down to a very low opacity, and that also confuses the pixels, like how the AI model like translates the data, and those are things that you can do right now today, um, if you want to make sure that the work that you're putting out online is filtered and protected from being scraped or utilized without your permission. And maybe you're someone like me who's like not avidly against AI. And so I would add on to that, maybe you put in a disclaimer that says, if you'd like to utilize my artwork in some way, shape, form, or fashion, please contact me directly at because maybe somebody has some use that you're willing to entertain, you know, and you should be open to listening to that. But they should come to you, and they shouldn't take it without your permission. But also, actually, I think a thing that I think we should cover is, in like as an artist, you put your artwork on a variety of platforms, right? I think there are some platforms out there that are very pro artist. There are others, that mm, might be dubious. um so if you put your artwork on something like DeviantArt, or on Instagram, or someplace like that, um just you should make sure that you check out what their AI policies are, right? Make sure that you understand exactly what their terms of service are. Are they are you giving them permission to utilize your art, right, in their algorithms?
Mhm.
Like, if you're into the news about what's going on with this at all, like, there's current litigation going on that involves the use of Stable Diffusion, and DeviantArt is involved in that, in that lawsuit. So it's just, it's something to be aware of. It doesn't mean that the platforms themselves are bad, but they have their ways of working. So you should be aware of the ways that they work. So that's another thing that you can do as an artist to protect yourself, is just to decide where you're going to put your work.
I know it's been kind of hinted at a few times so far today of how there is the environmental impact. And obviously, that is an entire topic we could do a whole different podcast episode on. So
Yeah.
we don't have to dive too deep into it, but just within this topic, of talking about AI art, how does it tie into the environment? Because I think same thing as we were saying earlier, a lot of people just genuinely just don't know how this works. So to kind of help people understand, how does AI tie into an environmental impact?
Yes, indeed. So there was a excellent article by the Washington Post last year, or maybe the year before, but it was looking at the water and the energy, among other things, that get used in generative AI. But to give the 2 points that I think hit really hard. So for every 100-word email that ChatGPT created, it cost 1 bottle of drinkable water, because there's 9 liters of water to evaporate per kilowatt hour of energy used. So this is equivalent to 1 week, once weekly. If you did a prompt once a week for a whole year, would require almost 1.5 water cooler jugs, those big guys, 1.43 water cooler jugs. And similarly,
Mhm.
that singular 100-word email would use the electricity equivalent to powering 14 LED lights for an hour. So once a week for a
Yeah.
year would be equal to 9.3 households here in America in Washington, D.C. for an hour. So it's not anything to sniff at. And also, a 100-word prompt is pretty small compared to a lot of the things I've seen, especially as a data scientist in this working world where people pretty consistently and understandably generate code. And a lot of times, those guys are several hundred lines long.
Oh yeah. I mean, and you know, Claude will write you an entire program and package it up for you. Like, and
Yeah.
I've seen people do it. Uh, the as with anything that tends to make life easier or more convenient, or your workflow easier or more convenient, there's a cost to that. And you know, all of our technology has an environmental impact. You know, it's all, we're sourcing minerals from every single for every single thing that we build and manufacture, right? We're, you know, oil, water, every
Silicon,
right,
everything. Yeah.
silicone, right, all kinds of stuff. So but AI and big data models in particular require large data centers. They require specialized chips, right? We're back in the age of supercomputers. You know, when computers were first, you know, coming out, like humongous boxes to generate simple math problems, right? And now we've got massive data centers that are churning out like petabytes of data and more of data. I don't know what the actual numbers are. Don't quote me. But you know, humongous amounts of data, and every single time that you generate something, it's like tons and tons of resources. The impact that you have just by generating one image is pretty significant. um you know, and so I go back to, you know, use it for work because you have to, right? don't don't use it for fun because you don't have to. You will not like that little moment that you get to of you know, of doing something faster, and you know, for no, for with no return at all, is not worth the impact that it takes on the environment to do it, in my opinion.
And there was something that we've talked about before, Fish, where I think you put this well, which is the result you get from an AI should not be the final result. There should be some amount of
Yes.
editing that goes into it. Because
Yes.
thinking of the code that these LLMs can provide, usually I or the interns or anybody else on the team still has to go through it, maybe not with the finest tooth comb, but at least to debug and make sure that it's still doing what we want.
There are two big important things to note here, right? Like,
Hmm.
well, you know, a lot of people think that their jobs are going to be replaced. Like, some people have had their jobs replaced. I should say that. And I think that companies might eventually find out that's not, that was a bad way to go. Your job does change though. Your job changes. You need to police the tool. You need to make sure that the results are accurate. You know, you need to minimize the amount of time. Like, you need to take time to prompt engineer correctly, so that you minimize the amount of time and waste that you in generations. Most people have to generate with art 3 to 4, maybe 5 times to get a correct to get the correct result. You know, so make sure that you're being really clear in in your prompting, and that your prompting is as refined as possible, or as early on as possible, so that you aren't wasting resources and time to do things that also, you know, like, if you're an artist and you're utilizing it for art, know that, you know, like, you're going to have to put that into Photoshop, or Clip Studio Paint, and or whatever your tool is, and and fix it. Like, your job is not done because of the AI. It's not lost because of the AI. It is altered though. It is different. And you have to make sure, and you still have to put your human touch on the work, to make sure that the result that you hand out is is quality. And the other thing I'll say to that is if you are a freelance artist and you're utilizing AI in your work, you should tell people that you're doing it.
Mhm.
Right. So
The
that's
transparency there is
that's
real important.
yeah, that is the ethical agreement for an artist that utilizes AI in their work. If I tend to do my personal drawings by hand, but if I were utilizing AI, there would be a disclaimer on that work because people have the right to decide whether or not they want to accept that work, based on because people have strong feelings about AI. So and you should respect that, you know, and
Right.
so maybe and so maybe that specific work is not for the for that audience. Maybe it's for a different audience.
Yeah. And also to bring it back to the time element, we had touched on when we were talking about the Studio Ghibli part, is if it's going to take you longer to prompt engineer what you need, and supposedly the load time for the AI to produce it, just do it yourself. And I
Yeah.
know that that can dive deep into the conversation of like, well, now that AI art is a thing, I don't have to learn how to do art.
Nah, you still have to learn how to do art.
You still got to learn a little bit,
I
yeah.
think I just I mean art is an aesthetic thing for a lot of people. But when I think you have to utilize your own design eye, and if you don't have an eye and a mind for design and for art and for line and color and typography and space and all the things that it takes to be a creative person, the results of whatever you decide to generate are going to show that.
Yeah.
Like, because that person is not going to be as critical of what's wrong with it. And while people are, who consume quote product, right? Like or who care more about product than about craft, they might be like, oh, like, well, it looks fine to me, but well, exactly.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course it looks fine to you. So as an artist, it is up to the artists to make sure that the work is high quality and worthy of human consumption, and let the people who want to put out junk, and the people who want to consume the junk will consume it, and the people who want quality will come to you.
With all of this in mind, where do you see Gen AI and, more specifically Gen AI art going in the future? It's here, people are using it for fun, people are using it for work. So where do you think this technology will really take us? I know Fish, you mentioned it has taken on people's jobs, it's become a everyday tool. Do you think more and more of that will happen, or how are you guys seeing that going?
I don't see it as a doom and gloom thing. I think that there are going to be people who continue to do traditional art, and I think, and my hope, my fervent hope is that people who value traditional art will gravitate towards them, and that AI will have the effect of elevating like really good what real quality art should look like. I think there will be people who will consume easy to consume things, and that will because that's a very niche space that some people just want to live in. um I think hopefully the environmental impact will be refined and lessened over time. Chips will get smaller, the machines will get smaller, and we'll be able to do more with less, which will allow the impact to be diminished, right, over time. I don't know how we're going to replace all the things that we've already spent, but that's a different problem. Um, so I think that it's something that people need to understand is a factor of their working lives, and they shouldn't be afraid of it. They should, but they should be aware of where it is right now, and how, and decide to use it responsibly now. Be a responsible user of technology, not some bombastic person who's just trying to hurt people, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. So hopefully if we do that, then AI will be used for good things, and will become a valuable tool, and not something that people need to be afraid of.
Yeah, I think the audience around AI is maybe separated into three groups, or at least I can go with three groups: the artists, the users, and the developers. And for the artists, just like we were saying earlier, protect your art as much as you see fit. Use glaze,
Mhm.
use nightshade, use whatever tools that you choose to protect yourself. And also, the way that I think it could be used by artists are in the ways that maybe part of the steps they don't like. So to mention
Mhm.
that 4-second Studio Ghibli animation that still took a year to animate, I've heard from some animators that they don't like doing the in-betweens, right? They want to get from point A to point B. So maybe there is some AI that could be used during that step to speed up the process, make it smoother. Um, and I think that's up to each artist what that means for them.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to group two, the users, we got to touch on that. Be aware of what you're doing and what this means for the people whose work you are benefiting from, and the people who you might not be able to see so easily and how they're being impacted. And then there's the developers, and it seems like there are a number of movements in these spaces to try and minimize these poor uses of AI. So something you had mentioned to me, Fish, was apparently OpenAI had added a refusal, which triggers
Mhm.
when users attempt to generate an image on the style of a living artist. Alas, people have found workarounds from it, but I hugely applaud
Yes.
OpenAI for putting in that safeguard, and I think more places should be interested in showing that. To see them putting effort into protecting artists and protecting what's right for these people who are being affected, I think that'll
Yeah.
go a long way. Because then there's the secret fourth group, the stakeholders, and that's just everyone who has a stake in this, everyone who's being impacted by this. You
Yeah.
are impacted by it because AI is just all around us. If it's not in what you do at work, it's in your phone, it's in your computer, it's in so many of the websites we know and love today.
Yes.
So, you know, putting your money where your mouth is, supporting the movements and the people and the organizations that you think are worth supporting will also go a long way.
Whether someone's an artist or, just a user, a consumer, are there any resources that you recommend if they want to learn more about all of this?
Right. So if you go down the researching path, I think there's a lot of articles you can find, but probably the easiest to consume information would be on something like YouTube. There are literally tons of artists that are raging about how AI is being used and what it means to them, and you get very specific opinions. Like I want to be clear. There's very little middle ground when it comes to the kind of opinion that you're going to get. If you go on to something like Twitter, you will get the exact opposite opinion. Um, and so I think part of the reason that we wanted to have this conversation is because I don't think that I see a lot of things talking about things from a middle ground perspective. I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of all or nothing sort of commentary on one side of the argument or the other. So but I think it'll be a good idea to just make a list of a couple of resources, and I've started that.
Yeah.
Some good articles and useful things that I've found, and I'd be happy to share that to people if they want to read it.
Mhm.
You can definitely link that in our show notes.
Yes.
Yeah. That sounds perfect. Otherwise, I think YouTube, I mentioned them briefly before. Fractal Philosophy has a good video of explaining kind of how AI works. Specifically, it talks about LLMs, so the text based thing, but as I tried to describe at the beginning,
Mhm.
it ties in very closely with how uh, AI art works as well. So, things AI will never
Yeah.
understand. It's a very good video.
The AI, the environmental impact stuff is also pretty easy to find. You can find a lot of information on environmental impact of AI and big data and all that kinds of stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Fish and Leslie, for coming on today. I know I see you guys all the time at work, but I know today you came in from a different lens, and always fun to have new friends on the podcast. So we really appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll have you back on as, just this continues to change and grow. So we really appreciate your insight. Thank you.